Welcome to another discussion on the Greek word proorizo. It is found in Acts 4:28, Romans 8:29 and 30, Ephesians 1:5 and 11, and 1 Corinthians 2:7. The word is commonly translated as predestined. If you ask the average person on the street what predestined means, they will say something like, God, before time, determined events with certainty. But is that what the word proorizo means? Let's take a look.
In many English Bibles, the word predestined is used to translate proorizo, a Greek verb with a normal semantic range like decide beforehand, mark out in advance, or pre-specify. It's a boundary word that can be applied to varying situations. We have surviving uses of this verb in non-biblical Greek from the 2nd to the 4th centuries, and they're very ordinary, everyday uses, things like picking a day for a wedding, or specifying what group of people to associate with or help. Those are the kinds of uses a normal Greek reader would recognize from conversation, letters, and storytelling. And that's the point. The verb doesn't carry ideas like grace, election, or a complete theological doctrine. If anyone ever mentions proorizo and predestined, and then suggests they mean a completed doctrine held by a church or a denomination, they are either mistaken or they are misleading you. A single verb does not carry all that meaning with it. A separate issue is the doctrine of predestination, which is not derived from the word proorizo nor the word predestined. The doctrine is a later, system-level theological synthesis constructed from how Augustine, Calvin, and others from the Latin Western church tradition thought God saves, how grace works, whether election is conditional or unconditional, whether outcomes are guaranteed, how foreknowledge relates, and so on. Now, to be clear, the word predestined is in the Bible, but the fact that some translators have put it there doesn't mean Paul or Luke held to the current Reformed or Catholic ideas of the doctrine of predestination. Remember, there is the word predestined, and there is the doctrine of predestination. Those are two different things. Don't let people conflate or confuse the two. Anyone who discusses them ought to be very clear about that fact so they don't mislead anyone. Remember, the word predestined comes from the Greek word proorizo. Proorizo would have been a very normal, everyday Greek word, and it's safe to assume the vast majority of average Greek speakers would have been familiar with it and used it themselves to explain their own actions and the actions of those around them. It answers a simple, practical question. What was already set ahead of time? It can answer that in a few everyday ways. It can mean, what date did we decide on? It can mean, what plan did we lay out? It can mean, what category did we define? It can mean, what confrontation did we set in motion? It can mean, what role or group did we designate? In other words, it marks out the scope of a matter in advance, the thing that is already set. What it doesn't answer is, how far back was it decided, or how detailed was it, or by what hidden mechanism was it guaranteed, or was every motive and every step fixed from eternity? Those are extra questions, and if a text wants to answer them, it has to do so with other wording and with clear context. It doesn't even tell you the subject or the object. It's a verb telling you an action. Now, God is not the only person to predestine or proorizo things. People do it too. Doctors, wedding planners, the Jewish leaders. There is no suggestion that Luke or Paul made up a new and special theological word to describe a theological concept. You can see that clearly in how writers use the word as a narrative device. Heliodorus wrote a long adventure romance called Ethiopica, probably in the later 4th century. In one scene, a long-running family feud has finally gone public. Two brothers have been locked in a bitter struggle over a prestigious religious office. The feud has been going on for a while, and at this point in the story, the conflict cannot stay private anymore. Now the story adds a powerful official into the mix. The governor's wife, Arsace, steps in and makes a ruling. The dispute will be settled by formal single combat. In plain terms, she takes an ugly rivalry and turns it into an official showdown. From that moment on, the situation has a track. There is a scheduled collision coming. People are gathering, weapons are out. The story has arrived at the moment everyone could see coming. And this is where Heliodorus uses the proorizo word. He says the returning father cannot escape what he calls to prorismanon, meaning the pre-marked out matter. It's the preset thing. That phrase is not a philosophical statement about eternal decrees. It's the narrator pointing at the obvious event the whole situation has been funneling toward, the showdown that is now happening. What makes Heliodorus 7.8 so useful is what he says right after. He says the father could not get around the preset situation, and then immediately says the father was fortunate to arrive at the right moment. That only makes sense if the scene has a fixed confrontation point, but an open ending. The duel is already underway, so the meeting itself is hard to avoid. But the result is not locked, because a timely intervention can still change what happens. That is how the word is working. Heliodorus is not teaching a theory of fate or explaining how the universe runs. He is doing something ordinary. He is pointing at the situation and saying, "This is the showdown that has been set up, and here we are." One could summarize the sentiment by saying, look at the situation the sons have gotten themselves into, arguing to the point that Arsace schedules a final showdown. That is what proorizo is marking. It's naming the preset matter, the confrontation, that has been defined ahead of time in the story world. It tells you what kind of thing you're dealing with, a set confrontation point. It doesn't tell you how detailed the setup was, and it does not tell you that every thought and choice leading up to it was fixed from the beginning. It's boundary language. It identifies the pre-specified clash, not a whole doctrine that everything had to unfold in one inevitable way. Proorizo does not specify the level of detail behind that advanced setting, or tell you that every particular was fixed in advance, any more than words like forward, backward, or upward tell you how far or how fast. Again, proorizo is boundary language, not a theory of necessity or certainty. Why is this important? Well, here's the move that keeps happening. People treat the English word predestined like it already contains a whole doctrine, eternal decree, exhaustive control, guaranteed outcomes. But that's not what the Greek verb means. Proorizo means to set something ahead of time, to mark out a scope, to pre-specify. It doesn't secretly mean God, and it doesn't secretly mean eternity, and it doesn't secretly mean every detail. If someone wants to argue for an eternal exhaustive decree, fine, but they have to argue that from the wider case. They shouldn't treat their system as if it were the dictionary meaning of proorizo, because it isn't.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation regarding proorizo, predestined, and how Heliodorus used the word in a normal setting. Check out our other videos and check in later for more normal, everyday examples of proorizo from Greek literature.